Welcome back to the Kaiser Report. I'm Max Kaiser. Time now to go to Chicago and speak with Bill Powers, author of Cold, Hungry, and in the Dark, Exploding the Natural Gas Supply Myths. Welcome to the Kaiser Report, Bill.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so Bill Powers, what is the natural gas supply myth and who created this myth?
Firstly, the myth is that that due to the technological innovations in hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling, is that the U.S. has somehow unlocked about 100 years of shale gas that will keep gas very cheap for years and allow the U.S. to go from a net importer of gas to a net exporter of gas and create, hundreds of thousands of jobs as well as really increase GDP. And this is a myth that was put forward through a combination of industry, government, and academia, as well as the private sector. So there's a lot of blame to go around, and I cover all of that in the book. Yeah, well,
we've been talking about this on the show for a while now, that the whole the economics of fracking don't add up. It seems like it takes more energy to go in than they get out. The environmental costs are outrageous, and the life of these wells is overstated wildly. Is that the case, Bill?
Yes, that's absolutely the case. And what we have seen right now, that due to a really free money that has been put forward, really low interest rates, a lot of companies have been able to finance themselves. So they've been producing gas at a loss for much of the last 6 years.
Let me jump in right there for a second.
Sure.
So, because this is a good point. Because of the quantitative easing, because of all the money printing that was there to bail out these zombie banks and to flood the economy with lots of cash, it was there was this notion that you could do this fracking industry and take these enormous losses, essentially, because it's not economic, because who cares? We're getting all this free money anyway, right?
That's largely correct. And what a lot of companies have tried to do is really grow production as fast as they can and then turn around and sell it to a greater fool. And we've seen this happen with BHP Billiton buying Petrohawk a few years ago. We saw it more recently with Shell buying East Resources for $4.5 billion, which it looks like they're going to have to write off the entire $4.5 billion that they put into East Resources. And we've seen this repeat itself over and over. And so the growth, the mantra amongst many independents is get as big as fast as we can, irrespective of how much debt we have to take on, and hopefully we can find a greater fool to sell it to. While shale gas is certainly grown, and it is economic at some price, it's just far higher than current prices.
Okay, let's talk about some of the actual numbers here. So what is the reality of natural gas supply in the United States? How much supply has fracking added to U.S. total supply, and at what cost, as you just mentioned?
Right now, to put some numbers behind it, if we look at how much shale gas has grown, it's grown from about 2.5 BCF a day 10 years ago to about 33 BCF a day currently. So that's an enormous growth, and it has largely made up for declines in conventional production, offshore production, coal bed methane, and tight gas. So it's really been helpful, but one of the things that's due to the free money has allowed companies to operate at selling gas at a loss. And this has gone on for years. And so it's really given many in the industry, many observers of the industry and consumers, a false sense of security of how much gas there actually is. And this is, like everything, this is coming to an end. And as the geology of the gas wells, of the new wells, starts to get progressively worse, which is what we're seeing happen already, you can ramp up drilling and production will go down. And that's already happening in the majority of the shale gas fields. There's only really a handful that are still growing.
A quick alert in terms of terminology here. BSA stands for?
Oh, I'm sorry. BCF a day is billion cubic feet per day.
Just so folks can follow along there. Okay. So U.S. demand has now increased dramatically. You bring something up very important in your book here. The demand has increased because of this rigging of the markets, if you will, or the distortion that you have with ultra cheap rates and the ability to operate at a loss. It's sending the wrong signal to the market. So U.S. demand has increased dramatically due to this fall in prices as consumers switch from heating oil to gas. Now, do you see something like in the 1970s where you had a supply shock on the horizon? Can you talk about that?
Yes, I mean, that is the first part of the book. That's exactly what I cover on how leading up to the 1970s, we had uninterrupted growth in gas production and gas consumption from the end of World War II towards the early 1970s. However, in between 1970 and 1985, production went down 20% due to the maturing of the fields that in Texas and Louisiana. Yet prices went up 13-fold. So where we are right now is we've had a lot of demand show up in the United States from companies wanting to build fertilizer plants, chemical plants, and a huge increase in natural gas-fired electricity generation. And this has created a situation where, as prices rise, this is going to be very difficult demand to destroy, and it's going to require extremely high prices, far higher than what people might expect right now.
All right, Bill Powers, author of Cold, Hungry, and in the Dark, Exploding the Natural Gas Supply Myth. It's an excellent book. You go on to talk about the boom in natural gas supplies. Due to this boom, U.S. corporations are pushing for a repeal of the laws that currently forbid them from exporting this surplus energy. So this is another huge wrinkle in the story. Will they succeed? Can the liquefied natural gas terminals be built quick enough to beat the fall in supply, et cetera? Can you talk on this, please?
This is another great point. I mean, right now we've had a huge build out in the ability to export gas that will be coming online over the next couple years. However, what I don't believe there will be the political will to do it simply because of what we saw in New England last year. And I'll give you a very specific example. Gas is normally trades right now. It's a little under $4. It was over $100 in Boston last winter. And this is an area where they had a very cold winter. They had numerous industrial consumers cut off. They had paper mills close in New Hampshire due to lack of gas supplies. And so we had very high electricity rates and home heating bills for many consumers. So I don't think there will be the political will to export gas into a rising price environment, because I just don't think this is something we're going to be able to do. And at the same time, we have to remember that the Canadians are on their way to exporting gas to Asia, and the U.S. is still a net importer of gas. So I don't see how this is really going to work, because many of the fields that they had hoped to use to find the surplus gas from are now starting to decline far earlier than many had projected.
All right, so I want to talk about this a little bit more here. So in other words, the spot price of gas in the futures market is just under $4, but you're saying last winter in Boston they were paying $100. So it's because, how can the markets be so out of line there?
Well, what happened is there was what happened in Boston, and this is just insanity in a couple of different ways. They had they've had numerous coal-fired power plants close in New England. This summer, they just closed 2 more coal plants in Massachusetts, and the Vermont Yankee nuclear plant is going offline by the end of the year. And yet, there's not the pipeline capacity to come from the Marcellus to New England. But more importantly, there was a significant pipeline built out of Nova Scotia to serve the New England market about 10 years ago that just came online in November of last year. And that pipeline is only 30% full due to lack of exploration success. There were numerous dry holes drilled in offshore Nova Scotia, and every single major has abandoned drilling wells up there. So it's not from just lack of pipeline from the Marcellus. It's just that where they were expecting to get the gas from just wasn't there. And now we've seen demand continue to increase for natural gas in New England, and yet supplies are just not growing. So this is going to happen elsewhere in the country, but this is where we are first seeing the first part of what I talk about, the gas crisis that will show up elsewhere in the country. It happened last winter in New England, and it will be repeated elsewhere.
From what I'm hearing you say here, Bill, is it safe to say that a 1970-style supply crisis is inevitable at this point, given the dislocations in the market and the trends that you see?
Yes, absolutely. Right now we have increasing demand, supplies are flattening, and we only have a couple fields that are growing. This is exactly what happened as we entered the 1970s gas crisis, where not only were hundreds of thousands of jobs lost, Many factories closed, and that may not happen here since we are not as dependent on manufacturing, but we are certainly going to see far higher electricity prices as well as home heating prices, and it's going to really dent confidence of the American consumer.
So, you talked about cheap interest rates. There's a lot of capital around for this sector. Does it make more sense to redeploy that capital into, let's say, solar, wind, or tidal? In other words, if you've got the cheap money around, is it competitive to do alternative sources of energy at this point? Is that just compounding the insanity of the situation? Your thoughts?
Well, I give a whole chapter in my book about ways to mitigate the coming gas crisis, and really distributed power, rooftop solar, battery storage. All of these things are going to play a meaningful role in mitigating the coming gas crisis, and that's really where we should be focusing more investment than we are currently, because it's we are going to need very high prices to destroy some demand, and there are technologies that have gotten significantly cheaper in the last few years that are readily available to many Americans and many businesses that I think make a lot of sense.
We talked in the first half of the show about water and water as it's used in fracking. It seems like the water is an additional burden on this equation because the availability of water, given the droughts, et cetera. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is becoming a fair statement given the amount of water that's being used in many fracking operations, and especially in the Southwest where water is becoming increasingly scarce. So that is going to play a bigger role as we go forward.
Again, getting back to the spread between the $100 gas price in Boston versus $4 spot price, is that also due to the fact that, unlike oil, gas seems to be less fungible in that to move it around mechanically through pipelines, it's not like oil, where oil is like a barrel of oil is a very fungible commodity and it can be shipped and the price is very consistent. Your thoughts?
Yes, and that's absolutely plays a big role in it. And as the U.S. has to increase its imports to make up for falling production, it's going to become even more difficult as we have to, rather than importing LNG, we're most likely going to become a material exporter over the next decade.
All right, Bill Powers, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
It was great being here. Thank you so much, Max.
All righty. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Bill Powers, author of Cold, Hungry, and in the Dark, Exploding the Natural Gas Supply Myth. If you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.